All right, guys, what we want to talk about today here is how to use a belt properly and how to create a stable spinal environment that's going to allow me to squat the most amount of weight possible in the most safe and stabilized manner I can achieve. So what we're going to talk about is exactly how do I acquire a more stable spinal position before I squat. The way that I'm going to go ahead and do that is by using my diaphragm and inhaling air in order to stabilize my spine. When we think about the breath before we squat, what we want to do is we want to try to acquire 360 degrees of inter-abdominal pressure. What we're trying to do is achieve a position that is a more neutral, or what we'll call a canister position, with the rib cage down and getting the bottom of the ribs closer to the top of the hip. Okay, we'll call this a canister position, as opposed to where we see a lot of people squat, and you'll see this a lot, and you'll hear this cue be told to the lifter before they initiate the squat. And what that will be is chest up, arch your back. And what that really does is it puts them into this huge amount of extension, right? Forcing pressure through the lumbar spine and actually destabilizing my trunk, right? My whole goal before I go ahead and squat is to create the most stable position possible so that I can express strength distally through the hip joint or the shoulder joint, right? Stability equals strength. That's something that I tell my athletes all the time, and it's so crucial to be thinking about when I'm setting up to run, jump, sprint, or do a compound movement. Okay, so back at the matter at hand, what we're trying to do before we go ahead and squat is create 360 degrees of expansion through the thorax and acquire as much pressure and tension through the abdominals and through the core musculature. What we want to think about again is we don't want to just fill up the belly and end up in this overextended position, but what we want to do is we want to have the diaphragm and the pelvis facing one another, creating this canister position that is very braced and stable. Okay, so what I'm going to think about is I'm going to take my air in, belly's going to expand, obliques are going to expand, and I actually should feel some pressure build through my lower back, right? So that 3D expansion of intra-abdominal pressure. So what that looks like is I take my air in, and now I'm in a good embrace position, right? I have expansion and tension through these three zones, okay? So again, that's going to be air in, rib cage is down, and I've created this zone of apposition, or this very stable neutral spine position. Okay, now how that relates to the belt is I'm going to be doing exactly the same thing I did without the belt. However, now with the belt, bear with me here, this thing's a little bit tight. Shout out Dean Guido, thanks for letting me borrow the belt. Helping me squat a little bit more weight and deadlift a little bit more weight safely. Okay, same thing. I'm not thinking about anything different now that I have this belt on. What I'm going to do is, again, instead of just what most lifters do is thinking about breathing into their stomach, creating that extended position and that artificial sense of, yeah, I'm stable now. What we actually want to do is again, acquire stability to be able to express strength, right? So, got my belt done up. Just ate some cabbage rolls, so a little full feeling here, but I'm thinking about exactly the same thing before I begin the descent in my squat. I'm going to think air in, and when I think air in, I'm going to think about that 3D expansion through the belly, through the sides, through the lower back. So it'll be, and I've created this huge amount of intra-abdominal pressure. I'm getting feedback through the sides of the belt, through the stomach, and through the back of the belt, and creating this zone of tension, pressure, and stability. Okay, so that's just a little bit of rant on how to use a belt properly, how to create intra-abdominal pressure. And again, I'm going to be thinking about these same things when I do a deadlift, before I go and do a ballistic vertical jump or medicine ball throw. And again, what we need to understand is the core is the gatekeeper of performance. Without core stability, I'm just leaking energy everywhere and just robbing myself of potential performance and just injury-free, efficient movement habits. Okay.